Hello and welcome. In this lesson, we're going to implement the delete account option on the settings screen of the chat app. Now, this is especially important these days because the Apple App Store now requires all developers to add this option to their app to allow users to delete their account. Now, how you actually handle it in the backend is up to you. However, I have a funny story, a little bit of a segue that has to do with Apple that I promise you pertains to our implementation of this today. So the story goes, I had a personal Apple developer account that I submitted my tax information to, and it was actually the CodeWithChris tax information. And CodeWithChris is an actual business, a registered business, But as the team grew, I decided to change to a corporate developer account because it has teams, and you can have multiple people access the account and things like that. So I created another developer account that was a corporate one, and it deleted the personal one. However, when I tried to add the CodeWithChris tax information on this corporate developer account, it said that it was duplicate and it wouldn't let me add it. And so when I contacted the support, I found out that even though I had deleted my personal developer account, it actually wasn't deleted. It was only deactivated and it wasn't active. And, as far as I was concerned, it was deleted, but really on the back end information, the data was still there. So what they had to do for me actually was they had to reactivate that personal account. I had to go in, delete my tax information or change it from there. And then they deactivated it again. But now I was able to add that tax information on the corporate developer account. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm going to take a similar approach here, because what I don't want. So I thought about several different ways I could do this for this delete account option. So if someone taps on this button, I could, for example, run some operations, like write some code in the app to just run through the database and delete things. Now, although I think that would work, it doesn't seem right to me to allow someone from the app just to delete things off the database like that. I can't tell you exactly what can go wrong, but just if there's an error in your logic, for example, as you're coding it, or potentially you are allowing a hacker to, have a route to delete things off your database. I don't know exactly how that would work, but it doesn't feel right to me. Another method I thought was perhaps I could allow someone to click on this button and it would send a support request to you or your support team or whoever to then go and manually delete those things. Maybe they can run some scripts that you have written that would automatically go through the database and delete all the information for that account. And I think that would work in the short term, but if your app grows and you get a lot of users, that could become unscalable. So the last option, and I thought of it because of this Apple story, was that probably the easiest thing to do, which is a compromise between those two things that we just talked about, is when someone taps on this button, it sets a flag or it flips some sort of switch or flag on the user account to sort of deactivate that account. And throughout the app, we can make sure that we check if the account is deactivated. We don't show them, in the chat, we don't show their chat messages, we don't show their name, things like that. So that's the way that I'm going forward with this. So the first thing we have to do, I guess, is to add a flag on these three users. And then we're going to also modify the user model. And then we are going to add a database service method that will go and flip the switch on your own account. So that database service method that flips the switch is going to be called when the user taps on this delete account button in the settings view. That's the settings view model. We have the settings view right here. And then when they do tap on that delete account button and that switch gets flipped, we need to log them out because they're still logged into the current session, even though we just deleted their information or deactivated their account. We need to log them out of this session and then present the onboarding screen again. And then finally, because at that point, this lesson would be pretty long, in the following lesson, we are then going to go through the code and make sure that if the account is inactive, we are not going to display their data. Okay, so let's get into this. So first of all, let's go into our Firestore database and add that flag. So we're going to let's start with this person, and I'll call it isActive, and then we're going to change this to a bool. So by default, it should be true. Let's add it to this person as well, making sure that it's consistently spelled the same way, or else we're going to have a problem. All right. Okay, looks good. Then we are going to go back into our project, and in the user model, we're going to add that here. Making sure, again, it's spelled exactly the same way. We'll default it to true. And then we are going to the database service. Where is that? Down here. And we are going to create a new section. So we have the chat methods down here, right before this closing brace. Let's call it account methods. I'm going to call it deactivate account. And it doesn't really accept any parameters except that we, after the switch is flipped, we probably want to provide a callback, allow the ability to pass in a completion method so that the UI can update when the switch is flipped. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll call this parameter, yeah, it should look like this. Okay. Okay, so we have to make sure that user is logged in, get a reference to the database, run the command. Okay, so make sure the user logged in, guard, let's see, auth view model dot is user logged in, else return. And then this would be let db equals Firestore. And then here we are going to say db.collection. The path is going to be users, right? And then the user ID. And what we're going to change here is I'm planning to change the first name to deleted, last name to user, flip this switch, and we're going to leave the phone number for now, but we can always change that because I think without this phone number, it's going to mess a lot of things up. So we're going to leave it for now. We're not going to get rid of that just yet, but I think eventually we'll want to, for the sake of completeness. Let's say document, and we're going to say auth view model dot get user ID, get logged in user ID. That's right. And then we're going to want to set data. And we're going to use this one where we can pass in a dictionary of data. We are going to say merge is true so that it doesn't replace the existing data with our dictionary. Instead, it merges this, essentially is an update rather than a replace. And then we're going to have the completion right here. So let's go ahead and do that. So set data, this is going to be our new data, and then merge is going to be true. In completion, I'm going to double click so we have this part here. Okay, so you get one parameter, which is error. So you're going to want to check if there's any errors with the transaction. Check for errors in it. If there are no errors, then you're going to want to call back this completion method. So if error is nil, that's good because that means there's no error. Then you're just going to call the completion method. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit because it's getting a little hard to see. Okay, so the data that we want to set remember it's key value pairs, right? So first is active, we are going to set that to false. And then we've also got first name that I wanted to set to deleted. And then last name set to user. Yeah, these three fields. Yeah, okay, well, we'll just leave the photo for now. Again, we can get rid of that later. Okay, so I think this is good. Now, where will this method be called from? So if we go back to the settings view, if we scroll down to this button, delete account, right? This is the button that's right over here. Now, it's true that we could essentially call the database service from here, and then in that completion method, once that switch has been flipped, we can log the user out and then show the onboarding screen. However, I think the sort of pattern that we've used throughout is basically we're not calling the database service from the views. We are doing it through the view models. So we are going to, instead from here, we're going to call a method in the settings view model. That's sort of like the data layer for this view. And then the settings view model instead is going to call the database service. So why don't we create that function here, or that method. Let's say deactivate account. Now again, this one has to have a parameter for the completion method because the settings view needs to know when it can, change the UI. When the deed is done, and then it's time to change the UI. So escaping, we'll do the same sort of thing here. This does seem a little unnecessary because we're essentially just adding this middle layer, just adding this extra step. It's like playing telephone, right? Settings view, telling settings view model, telling database service, and then database service calling back to settings view model, which calls back to settings view. So yeah, you don't have to do it this way. And I think that I'll probably chat with the team and see what everyone's opinion is about this. It does add an extra step to follow, right? Hopefully the good thing about doing this is that we sort of separate the concerns between the view model, and the data, the different layers here. But perhaps, you could argue that we are making things more complicated than they need to be. Okay, so here we're going to call the database service. We need to create an instance of this. So let's do it up here. Okay, so we're going to go database service dot deactivate account. So when it is complete, let's say deactivation is complete. We're going to call the completion method here. So this now that we have this method deactivate account in the settings view, we can call it. Okay, let's just call deactivate account. Because we do have a reference to settings view model here, and then we can say deactivate account, and then let's say deactivated. So log the user out, log out, and show onboarding. Auth view model.log out, and then is onboarding equal true. So this should basically be it. Why don't we give this a try? Let's see if I'm missing anything here. No, I think this is it. Okay, so let's run this. We're going to keep an eye on our database. Okay, so this is I'm logged in here. Chris True Ching. Yeah, there we go. Deleted user false. All right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson.